Okay. Oh, lovely. Um, there we go. Hi, everyone. My name's Ian. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Sanjeev, for asking me to share, and thank you everyone who's made the meeting possible. Um, yeah, it's an honor. It's an honor to share at an AA meeting, and especially like to be asked to be shared at a meeting. All expenses paid in India. Do you know what I mean? From London, which is lovely. Um, yeah, I remember Sanjeev asked me what the topic was today, and like I always struggle with topics. Like, I don't want to come across like I know too much. You know what I mean? I don't want to be like, whenever I pick a topic, I don't stop thinking about that topic. Do you know what I mean? From like the minute it gets picked to, because I want to try and impress people, and it's part of it. But the truth is, I don't need to impress anybody. I just got to express my gratitude for AA, and like I really do love AA. I love it's given me a life. Like it's given me a life. That's all I can say is that I chose the topic asking for help because it's something that I just couldn't do before coming to AA. I could not ask for help, and it got me in a lot of bother, a lot of trouble for a long time, and I still struggle with it at times, in recovery as well. But so I just recover. I just qualify myself and stuff, for the first, because 30 minutes in London we share for around about 10, 15 minutes all the time in an hour-long meeting. So to have like a half an hour to share, it's quite a long time. My mind's like, how am I going to fill 30 minutes up? And the yeah, I go to the Soho Sober Group 6 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. That's one of my home groups. I've got another home group which is the Brick Lane Big Book Study, and my sponsor was on here a couple of weeks ago in the last meeting, and he Eddie, and he was yeah, I do that one, a big book study, and I do a 12 and 12 meeting as well. So I always try and stay involved with the AA literature, and and I'm 4.5 years sober, just over 4.5 years sober, and yeah, I'm grateful for that. And I grew up basically in a like my family that is surrounded with like stuff, right? Not just alcoholism. There's other stuff going on, and stuff. I got a brother with drug-induced schizophrenia and bipolar, and I got my other brother's in trouble with alcoholism right now, and he can't give it up. He's in a bad way with it. My dad's dead from alcoholism. He died when I was he died 6 months before I came into AA, and was one of the reasons why I came into AA. And I never really knew him really. He lived three doors away from where I was born, and 3 streets away from where I was born, and like he used to hit my mum and stuff, and so they weren't together when I was born, and I knew this guy was my dad. And I remember growing up and sort of walking to school, and he used to be a window cleaner. He used to wash windows outside houses, and I used to be frightened going to school to see this guy, and because I knew it was my dad, and if I saw the ladders, I'd have to take a detour, away around and stuff, to get away from this guy. And you know, I'm gutted that he died before I came to AA, because I see him in a different light today than I did then. And growing up, I realized that, he was a sick person, not a bad person. I thought he was a bad person. Alcoholics, from my own experience, I did some stuff that wasn't nice and wasn't good, and it was quite shameful. And yeah, like the steps have sort of helped me sort of deal with that, and draw a line on it and start my life again. And that's why I say that, Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a new life. And so for me, drinking for me, the fact that my family are all alcoholics doesn't mean that I'm an alcoholic. The reason why I'm an alcoholic is because when I drink, and when I did drink at the age of 13, I got kicked out of people's houses for the amount that I drank, and my behaviour when I was drunk. But I never stood out in my family. When your grand's called Mad Margaret, Scottish grand Mad Margaret, it's hard to stand out in a family like that. And I left home at 16. And I couldn't afford alcohol for the next 3 or 4 years, really. But when I did drink, I got into trouble. I would, people would remind me I had blackouts, and people would tell me, I could tell by the look on people's faces when I'd come downstairs after like parties. They'd be looking at me and like, you were a bit weird last night. But I got away with it because I was like the youngest of the group. So I was like young and weird. And by the time I came into AA, the young bit had just dropped off, and I was just weird. you know. I was just the weird guy, you know. And the yeah, I remember going to, you know, and when I was like, so I left home at 16. I left home at 16, and with my this kind of idea of like not asking for help and stuff. I remember I got a girl pregnant. A girl pregnant. We were together for 2 months, and I didn't. I got frightened. I ran away from the situation. I ran away from the situation, and you know, maybe, you know, it wasn't rightly so, or anything like that, but it wasn't a very good situation. But the way I handled it, you know, I ran away from the responsibility of it, and I remember trying to get back into a life when I was like 21. I tried to get back into the kids' life. They were twin girls, twin daughters, that were born when I was 21, and I tried to get back into their lives. And I started seeing them 2, 3, or 4 times, and um, 3 or 4 times, and I passed my driving test in order to drive and see the kids. And you know, I was doing all right, and and I had a drink one night before I was going to see them, and I didn't, and set off the allergy, you know, the allergy, the phenomenon of craving that I had, and I didn't show up the next day to see them. You know, she gave me an opportunity to see the kids, and I didn't show up for them, and she said that I couldn't, that I should, that I'm not going to see them that day. That's all she said that day, and you know, and I got angry, and I drank again, and I ended up losing my license, drink driving, and crashed my car into a petrol station. And that was you know, that was like, you know, and that wasn't my fault, that was her fault as well, you know. I blamed her for that, you know. That was my thinking. If she'd have let me see my kids, you know, and I had this kind of mentality. And anyway, I didn't ask for help, you know, the whole time. I then went back to London. This was in Great Yarmouth, and they're about 200 miles away. And I went to London and carried on working, and yeah, carried on working in London. And the I ended up doing really well in my career. I said, I'm gonna work hard, and I'm gonna pay for the girls, but I'm not gonna see them, you know. And I'm doing it my way, you know, because I've got a plan of how I'm gonna sort out my life. And you know, lots of people are telling me, why don't you get back in their lives? Why don't you? And I'd make up stuff and pretend that she'd say that I weren't allowed back in their lives, and she never stopped me being in their lives, but I was just lying. And you know, I was lying because I was petrified to be in their lives, because I think deep down I knew that, like, the way I lived my life and the way I drank, I couldn't keep turning. I couldn't remain turned up for anything. You know, a relationship I couldn't hold. I couldn't do any of it, because when I drank, I just smashed stuff to bits. And I remember so then, from the moment that I didn't see the kids for the next 6, 7 years, you know, my career went up, and then I started developing this whole lie. And I was drinking every night, and I became a daily drinker. And I remember, you know, my behavior in relationships was just, you know, it was horrendous. And it's part and parcel of being an alcoholic of my variety, is you pour alcohol on top of me already, and you know, it just yeah, it's just not a good combination at all. You know, I learned that, you know, but I didn't really know any of this at the time. You know, I just was just drinking, and I love the effect that alcohol gave me, you know, because it relieved me of my mind. It got rid of all the stuff, you know. And you know, and this feeling, I remember coming into AA and people saying about this feeling of separation and this feeling of being separate to, I remember always sitting in my house drinking, thinking, why can't I be like everybody else? Why can't I just be a normal person? And I remember waking up one morning, or not waking up, I was downstairs having a drink outside, just hanging on my front doorstep, you know, in a flat block of people. There was a flat apartments, and you know, and seeing people go to work at 6 a.m. and I'm drinking, and I'm thinking, why can't I just be like, this guy, you know? And or just live a normal life. And anyway, to move forward, the to move forward, by the time I got to my dad's funeral. My dad's funeral was my real dad's funeral. Me and my brother decided to go to it because he died at the age of 55, and he had a heart attack and choked on his own vomit, and that was how he died. And me and my brother sort of went, okay, well, we'll go to his funeral. And at this point, and I remember at the end of his funeral, the eulogy, it said, let's get to the pub and do what he did best. It was what his brother said, my uncle. And I was sat at the back of this room and sort of with family that I'd never really met. And I was thinking, like, you're exactly like this guy. You know, you haven't seen your kids in 7 years. You're drinking every day. You know, you're you're drinking every day. Your life's a mess. You know, the stuff that people didn't know because I was on my own and I lived on my own in London is that, you know, I was going to work giving people like tax advice, and I hadn't paid tax in about 6 7 years. You know, so I was just, you know, so I'm running from all of that, and I'm petrified of the front door of the bailiffs, or someone's going to knock down my door, and get me the, and. But in that moment of being at the funeral, I had like a moment of clarity that you've got a problem with drinking. Now, before this, there was partners and people that said, you've got a problem with drinking. My best mate, John, a Scottish guy, said, I've got a problem with my drinking, but I didn't have a problem with it, you see. And I wasn't listening. And so when people would say, oh, you've got a problem with drinking, I just wasn't listening. I just batted it off. But it's not the drinking, it's this. And I was the master at just going and palming it off and going, no, it must be this that's the problem. It's not the drink. And I do that immediately, pretty skillfully as well, you know. And I remember, so I tried to stop then. Over the next 6 months, I was trying to stop, and that's when it got worse, because I realised I can't stop. You know, once I do stop, I can't stay stopped. And I remember I stopped for, I think it was 2 weeks, and I planned the day when I was going to go back drinking again. I was going to have one beer again, and I got to the pub and I had one drink, and it just lit me up. I just had this feeling, this like lit up feeling, and it went, you know, and I went with a couple of friends, and they said, what? We've got to go to work. They had to go to work. One of them got called into work, and my mind's like, ding, ding, ding. This is amazing. This is amazing. So they're going to work now. I'm just going for one, but now they've gone to work, and I just carry on drinking. I wake up the next day, and I'm like, you know, walking around work thinking, how am I going to go? How am I going to get in? How am I going to go to work and do this and get through? And you know, and I worked as like an actor and theatre and stuff, and so I'd go on stage and I'd be battered and sort of like petrified with, like, you know, like 1,000 eyes staring at you. Do you know what I mean? And you're sort of like trying to and you're praying to you know, to something, that if I just get through this day at work, I'll never drink again. And like in that reading said, all these different ways of trying to stop drinking, and ad infinitum. I had so many, you know, I'll never do it again. And then by the end of the show or something like that, I'll be in my mind, I was thinking, I'm going back to I'll go to the pub, and I'd be drinking that night again, you know, straight again, and all that. And so anyway, the point of this all is that at any moment during that, I could have asked for help, but I didn't ask for help of anybody, and I couldn't ask for help. And I remember there was a woman who went for a meal with a friend of mine, and she didn't drink at this meal, and I asked her why she didn't drink, and she said she doesn't drink. And I got all inquisitive, because I thought that people who didn't drink were a bit spooky. Do you know what I mean? Because it didn't, you know, that's, you know, it was just weird. It just wasn't in my brain that that people didn't drink. You know. And I asked her, and she said because she stopped drinking, and she asked me why, and I said to this woman, I said, I think I've got a problem with it, and she was 33 years sober, and in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she said, I can take you to, because she was a friend of a friend. There was something about her, and she was about 70 years of age, so I just trusted her, and she was a bit quirky, and I liked her, you know, I liked her attitude and stuff, and she seemed like a decent person, and she said, I can take you somewhere that can help you with your drinking. And I went to an AA. I went and I said, all right, I'll go. And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, saying yes to go into that meeting. And she took me to a meeting on the Friday, and I went downstairs, and you know, and I got identification. Funnily enough, there was an Indian guy called Tilak there, and this guy called Tilak lived in Delhi, but he was on holiday in and I remember this meeting, you know, I don't remember all of it because my mind was all blurred, you know, it was all sketchy, but I remember certain moments of my recovery where people really, well, it's love, isn't it? They gave love for free, and they tried to give you a bit of hope. And this guy called Tilak said, I can see in your eyes that you want this. it was at the end of the meeting, and I was like, yeah, I do. I think I want this. I think I want this thing that that I've been shown in this meeting. And I met my sponsor in that meeting as well. And he wasn't my sponsor then, but he took my number and he said, "You've won the lottery coming to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous." And it doesn't look like it there, does it? Because all you see, I'm still quite a material person at that point, and I can just see scrolls, I can see people, I see chairs, but I don't really understand the spirit of AA, and there's definitely no God in my life at that moment, although if there is, it's tiny, and I don't understand it for what it is. And I think I've got a better understanding of that now, having been around in AA just a little bit longer than that. And my sponsor said to me, "Call me tomorrow." So basically what happened is I asked for help from that woman, and I go to a meeting, and I called this guy, Eddie, this guy called Eddie the next day. He said, "Call me at 10 o'clock in the morning." And I said, I went, "Yeah, I will. I'll call you at 10 o'clock in the morning." And at 1 o'clock the next afternoon, he texts me and says, "You're okay." And, and I got my first glimpse of like why. I was very busy, you see, too busy to save my own life, and in my mind, And the next day, he said, "You don't have to do this, If you don't want help, you don't have to do it, And I said, "No, I want help. I want help." And he said, "Call me every day at 10 o'clock then, and don't be late, And I call him Hitler, and he calls me Slippery. We have like a funny, because he's like an AA fascist. You know what I mean? He's sort of like he's by the book, and he's a great guy, and I love him. I really do. And because he gifted me AA, and I remember, so I started to call this guy, and he said, "Get some service." So I got some service, and I was doing tea and making tea at a meeting, and I got involved with AA straight away. I was hooked. I became hooked in AA. I went to lots and lots of meetings. I went to meetings every single day. He said, my sponsor said, "How often did you drink?" And I said, "Well, every day." And he said, "Good, get to a meeting every day then." And I couldn't argue with him. Whenever I called him and I said, "Look, I can't get to a meeting today," he would say to me, "Well, you always found time to get a drink every day, didn't you?" And I couldn't argue with him, And there was something about him, because the truth is, I couldn't kid a kidder. He'd been there. I couldn't. He'd been there. He was alcoholic. And so he knew what was going on in my mind, even when I didn't know what was going on in my mind. And he could tell. And anyway, he said, "Get some tea," and I started getting tea, and then people are trying to help me while I'm trying to do the tea, and my resentments are picking up. People are trying to help me, and I don't want the help because I'm trying to do the tea. I can only focus on one thing at a time. So I'm trying to back people off, trying to help me with the tea, and I just can't. It was all about like asking. I understand now AA, that all of AA for me is like is asking for help. Like, you go into a meeting trying to help others is, paradoxically, I'm trying to help myself. I have to help myself. I need all of AA. I tried for a long time. When me and my sponsor went through the steps, he said, this you've lived this, you did this to your life, no one else. This is what you did on self-will and on your own, and I couldn't argue with him. And he said that Alcoholics Anonymous, it's a team sport, we've got to do it together, and you can't be on your own. So basically, if someone's asking if they want to help out with the tea, just invite them in, let them help. And I remember I was doing my step 4, and I was doing my step 4, and I couldn't sit straight. And people were saying, "Do you want to lift to meetings?" I'd be like, "No, I'll make my own way to the meetings. I'll make my own way to the meetings. I'll do." I wanted the help, but I couldn't accept the help. It was this weird sort of thing. And I remember doing my step 4, and I'm wriggling all over the place, and I'm doing everything but my step 4 because I didn't want to look at it. And I remember my spot, like, but basically what happened was I was playing football, I broke my ankle, and someone says to me, "Do you want I can give you a lift to a meeting?" And I've got a broken ankle, so I can't get to the meeting, And I go, "No, I'm all right, I'll get to the meeting." And I end up taking the brace off, driving my own car with a broken ankle to the meeting, driving with a broken ankle to the meeting, getting in the car, putting my brace on, going into the meeting and pretended to everyone that I got the bus there, you know, and try, because I didn't want the help. And I just, you know, I couldn't see it because, you know, the fact is then, the funny thing is then my car broke. So I couldn't even drive to the meeting. So I had to ask for help. And it was like, you know, for me, I find it funny because this for me is a God incident. You know what I mean? He broke my leg and then broke my car. And then I had to ask for help to get to a meeting because I was still desperate not to drink. You know, people can say that's mental, but I don't care. And anyway, so the point is, you know, for asking, you know, and asking for a sponsor and asking for help. And I sponsor people now, you know, through doing the steps. I'm no longer addicted to, I'm no longer, you know, obsessed with alcohol, which is that basically that when I stop drinking, I can't stop thinking of the off license. I can't walk past the drink in the supermarket. I can't be around anyone that's drinking because the clinking of the glass just keeps me, you know, and it's all that. I'm just obsessed with it. I'm no longer obsessed with it. You know, for me, you know, for me, this program is about my alcoholism and the way that I live my life to make sure that I live in the right way, that I don't ever, you know, go back to don't ever have to pick up a drink again. And as far as AA's, you know, so for me, I had to make amends to my children. That was one of the things. I had to make amends, and to the mother, Frankie, who I didn't like, who I hated when I came into AA, because I hated it. And my sponsor said, "You really hate her, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Good, get on your knees and pray for her." He said, "Pray for her wealth, health, and happiness." He says, "She's been looking after your kids. You know what I mean? While you've not been there for the last 7 years, while you've been off drinking." And I did it, and I made amends, and I made amends, and you know, I went and met her, and a month later, she gave me an opportunity to see my children again for the first time, and that was 7 years after I walked out again, and stuff, and now, you know, and that's been amazing. The last 2 years, I've been sort of getting to know my children, and you know, it's going so well that, you know, they don't have to pretend to like me anymore. So you know what I mean? So it's you know, so that was one thing that came in. I'm sort of drawing up. How long have I got now? On sort of, I'll share more about it's just my experience in it. How long? Sorry, Duba.
7 minutes.
7 minutes.
6 minutes.
All right, 6.
7 or 6. Yeah, please carry on.
Okay, yeah, and basically the yeah, so now I'm trying to develop a relationship, and I go to people who have had experience of the problems. So basically, when I come, I'll tell you another story. Because all I've got is my experience, right? And sometimes I think I need to come here and give a lecture, all right? And it's not. I've just got my experience of me being an AA, and I've gone to. I remember I was having relationships problems, so I went to a person to help with a problem in my relationship. Now I'm a straight man, and I went to a person who's I call him my Auntie Daniel, right? And he's a good friend of mine, and but I go to him for relationship advice, you know. By the time I've ended that, by the time I've got the advice off him, he bear in mind he's a gay guy. He's a gay guy and single, a gay guy and single, and I go to him for advice. And you know, if you ask an alcoholic for advice, they'll give you it. Do you know what I mean? Whether they've got any experience or not. You know, someone told me that before, and I remember by the end of that conversation with him, I was an in the closet gay man, and I needed to get out the relationship apparently, and so that didn't help much really. So now I go to, you know, when I've got problems, like my sponsor said to me in the beginning, he said, "Look, if you've got a problem, don't try and give your opinion to people. You know, if you haven't got any experience of it, go to somebody in AA who has the experience of the problem and has come out the other side, or, you know, and sort of." Like they can share their experience, you know, and you know, and so I did that, you know, and I go to people, you know, when I've got relationship problems, I go to people who are in relationships, who have been in relationships a long while. If I've got problems with my children, I go to people who've got children, you know, and I've got problems, you know, there's plenty of people. I go to those people. For me, it's God sends people. God sends people, and in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's enough good people. And I if I ask for help to two or three, four of my through four of my friends in AA, from that I'll extract God. I don't have to sit there and come up with solutions all the time myself, or ever really. I can just go and speak to people in AA, and I extract God from that, especially if they're my friends who are smiling and happy in AA and really working recovery and living a good life. And they give me a good sort of answer. And I think realizing, like, after like 2-3 years, because 2 years in, for the first 2 years it was like a pink cloud. I couldn't believe that I was sort of living this, like, that I'd been gifted this sort of relief, relief from myself, and relief from alcohol, and relief from myself, and it was all good. But after that came, like, I think someone said to me that it gets angry, it gets angry or gets resentful, because I was sort of no longer sort of at death's door with alcohol, because I was dying by the time I came to AA. I was no longer at death's door with alcohol. I was becoming very ungrateful for the life that I had, and it become pretty big. And with like a new family that I hadn't seen, a partner, and all this. And for me nowadays, it's a day, it's a one. It has to be. I'd lost track of the fact that it's a one day at a time program, and that and that for me it's a gift to live one day at a time. One day at a time. Just wake up, completely surrender, invite God in the morning, or what I understand of God to be in the morning, and then go out that day and try and be of some use. Because I've learned from, like, being in recovery, not drinking, that I can mess my life up, drunk or sober. And the sober one's hard. You know what I mean? When I mess things up sober, and I'm grateful that since the first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've never had to have a drink. I've never had a drink, and and I don't intend to drink. I really don't. I think the what I've been given, and the gift that I've been given in AA, and what I've opened up to, which is God and love and all stuff that, when I was in active alcoholism, I just did not have access to, because there was too much of me in the way completely. And then I opened up, and I've got good relationships with people, and people to talk to, and it is love. And I don't know, I don't know whether I ever had that or ever didn't before, but it is that. And I remember hearing when I came to AA, I thought anyone who was married was a knob, anybody who had a house was a knob, and anybody who loved was a knob. Do you know what I mean? I had a small mind because I never felt it, I never experienced it, and I couldn't get it. Do you know what I mean? So I resented everything with that. And like today, I've got a good life. I don't drink. I try and ask for help every day, especially from God, and I accept that I'm 4.5 years in. I ain't no expert at this stuff, and I hope never to be an expert of it. I just try and share my experience, and if it's helpful, great. If it's not helpful, there's a lot of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous that you can go to and find stuff that's helpful. I try and give in AA. My life's better when I try and give in AA. When I try and take from AA, my life gets, I start getting resentful at meetings. I start getting resentful, and because I'm trying to take again. And my sponsor said to me, we get sobriety, then we give it back, and we try, and we give. And I think that's probably time, and hopefully that's been helpful. But thank you very much for asking me to share. And I look forward to hearing the other two speakers and the guys with a lot more time than I've got. I'll leave it there. Cheers.